All right, let's bring in tonight's panel, Sky News host Steve Price and contributor Joe Hildebrand. Welcome to you both. Great to see you. Well, let's start with tonight's breaking news, Joe. Peter Dutton is right now in Israel. He's going to be meeting, as I just revealed, with the Israeli President Isaac Herzog, with the Israeli Foreign Minister, senior members of the government. Joe, this stands in obvious contrast to our Prime Minister, who has refused to pay a solidarity visit to Israel since October 7.
Yeah, it does. Look, I initially said that Anthony Albanese needed to wait for an invitation to visit Israel from the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. It seems that invitation is not going to be forthcoming. It hasn't handled it particularly well, and I think the problem is that you have to be consistent in these things, and you have to take the right stand. You will find that is actually politically rewarding as well as the right thing to do. And I think if there had been, and he was, unequivocal in condemning the October 7 attacks. He wasn't, unlike Penny Wong, he didn't say, we urge Israel to, be proportionate in its response. But again, if he had been right there, with Israel, visiting those communities that were affected, meeting the Prime Minister, it would make it, I think, politically easier for him to, for example, move the motion that was moved at the New South Wales Labor Conference over the weekend and to, condemn the actions in Gaza as it was for President Biden to do so, for example, because his allegiance to Israel is not under question. And I think that's where the Labor Party needs to be, and they should take a leaf out of Joe Biden's book and maybe not Kamala Harris's.
Well, we'll get to the Labor conference a bit later in the show. But Steve, the Prime Minister was interviewed on Sky today by Kieran Gilbert, and I was interested to hear him, and he doesn't say it often, reiterate government's travel advice that people shouldn't be going to Israel. Have a quick look.
People shouldn't be travelling, Australian citizens shouldn't be travelling to that region, given the instability which is there and the risks of escalation which are there.
I mean, Steve, you'd presume the PM would have known through DFAT that Dutton was making this trip, so perhaps that's where the comments are going to go over the next couple of days, that Dutton shouldn't be there.
It really does give the opposition, and Peter Dutton in particular, more oxygen to describe Anthony Albanese as a weak leader. Now, you've heard those two words, Sharri, on numerous occasions over the last couple of months. They keep prosecuting this case that the bloke in the lodge is not a strong, decisive leader. So what Peter Dutton's trip does, of course, is put even more pressure on Anthony Albanese in that regard. And so, and you can't underestimate either that it is a dangerous place at the moment. And Peter Dutton has decided to go on this very quick trip over 3 days. This whole Hezbollah issue could blow up while he's in the air or on the ground there in Israel. And it shows that he's prepared to actually go there and show an example of what Australia would be like under a Dutton government and the Dutton government's attitude to Israel. It shows a very big gap between the Albanese government and what Peter Dutton would be like in power. And I think that's what the aim of the trip is as well.
Yeah, indeed. Joe, let's turn to the weekend's reshuffle, Sunday's reshuffle. Look, the Prime Minister has tried to say, oh no, there were no failings by Clare O'Neill. She was doing an excellent job.
Everybody wins. It's like a children's birthday party. Everybody gets a prize.
Yeah, but this is ridiculous. No one believes that ministers were performing so well that they just had to be moved out of their portfolios.
Well, of course no one believes it, but he has to say it, doesn't he? He's the Prime Minister. They're his colleagues. He's saying the right thing. It's like when, you send out an email saying that, like Joe will be leaving us at the end of this month after 15 years with the company. We wish him well in his future endeavours. He's been a wonderful employee. Of course he's going to say that. Blind Freddie knows that's not the case. I don't think this reshuffle is the disaster that a lot of people seem to be painting it as. It seems very sensible to me.
Sensible? Tony Burke in Home Affairs?
I like it. Tony Burke is a really, really strong performer. People might not agree with his past decisions or his past positions, but he's a very strong performer. He's smart. He's a strong parliamentary performer. He'll be able to handle it very well, I think. Andrew Giles, I think, is the real sort of, I suppose, culprit in the disaster over the immigrant detainees, and he's been absolutely shafted. He's been absolutely shelled, but it looks like a move sideways technically, so that's fine. Again, when was the last time you heard about the wonderful work Brendan O'Connor was doing in skills? Never. That's why no one's going to hear from Andrew Giles ever again. Clare O'Neill, a bit like Bill Shorten being sent to NDIS, you've got a portfolio that wasn't even in cabinet the last time Labor were in government. It's now a really front of centre, supercharged, important portfolio. And what do? You get someone who's got a lot to prove, who maybe didn't have such a great run on the paddock last time round. You say, right, your reputation, your legacy depends on you fixing this crisis. That's what Shorten is doing right now with the NDIS, and that's what I reckon Clare O'Neill would do.
Given housing is so critical, given it's part of the reason inflation is so high, you think Albanese would put the absolute best minister in that. Steve, I want to hear your take though on what Joe just said, because I completely disagree with him that Tony Burke couldn't be better for Home Affairs. I mean, Home Affairs, you need someone tough on national security, tough on immigration, someone who is strong on terrorism. I mean, Tony Burke didn't call out the hate preachers after October 7 immediately.
Was Joe out the back when you started the show today? Was he been missing in action? I mean, he clearly didn't hear a word you said if he thinks Tony Burke's going to do a great job. I mean, Tony Burke has a seat, which, as you point out, Sharri, is the centre of radical Islam in Australia. And he, if he wants to retain the seat, has to keep the Muslim vote, and that's what he is going to be doing. I mean, why would you put someone like that in charge of Home Affairs? I mean, this whole O'Neill-Giles thing just makes me laugh. I mean, I sometimes wonder whether the Prime Minister actually listens to himself when he speaks. He was on Sky today with Kieran, and he had a crack at Barnaby Joyce over those comments Joyce made yesterday, and he said, "What does this bloke have to do to lose his job?" Was he talking about Andrew Giles, or was he talking about Clare O'Neill? I mean,
exactly.
Give me a break.
Such a good point.